What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. Today, we're going to be doing yet again another trade destination video, and the player we're going to be talking about today is Jesse Puljujarvi, who's been in trade rumors for the longest time, and recently, if I'm not mistaken, on December 7th, uh, it was reported that he was questioning his NHL future, saying maybe I just don't have it. So we thought it was time to make a video covering the teams that are interested in Jesse Puljujarvi, and we do believe that he will get traded by the deadline, so might as well. And there was a lot of promise surrounding him back in 2016 when he was drafted in the first round, fourth overall by the Edmonton Oilers. It was kind of a rocky start. He started with Edmonton, didn't work out, left to Finland, did very well there. Then they hired Ken Holland as a GM.
Yep.
He persuaded him to come back. Comes back. There was high expectations because you're like, wow, he's at it. He's probably developed now. He just needed a little bit more time, and he comes back and he started off a little bit good, and then after he started declining again, and now we're at a point where there was rumors even during the offseason that maybe he was going to trade it, but he signs a 1 year deal just for this season at $3 million. So past this season, he will be um, a UFA. So take it away, Luca. What are your thoughts?
I think what's been very surprising about Jesse Puljujarvi is just the downfall that he's really had with the Oilers, and I mean, it just hasn't worked out in Edmonton. And this is a guy that when he was drafted fourth overall in 2016, there was a lot of opportunity and a lot of hype around him about the type of player that he was going to be. And I think that a part of it has to do with the Oilers just not putting him in a position to succeed, and I think a lot of it has to do with him as well. This is a guy that has had his fair share of chances in Edmonton, has tried to be put in a position to succeed on most occasions, not all occasions, but on most occasions. And I don't think he's taken the opportunity to be the guy that he's expected to be. And this is also a situation where look, he's still young enough. He's 24 years old. It's an opportunity for him to potentially get traded to another team and potentially see if there's a fit there. He's still a guy that scored 15 goals in 2020 2021. You know, got 25 points in 55 games in his return in the NHL. And then, last year he had a decent season for his standards, right? 36 points. He had 65 games played, 14 goals, 22 assists, 36 points. He was really good last year. A lot of Oilers fans were actually surprised with how well he played and how solid he was. And then he came in the playoffs and had 3 points in 16 games, and people were kind of disappointed with Puljujarvi. And I think that, this season he's had a really horrible start to the year. And there's talk about him being traded. There's also talk about him being put on waivers. But this is a guy that I think has all the tools to become a really good NHL player. But I think he lacks a lot of things. He lacks consistency, number one. I think one of the biggest things with Jesse Puljujarvi is you can see him on some nights and he's the best player. Sometimes, well, I mean, on the Oilers, it's kind of hard to be the best player on the ice when you have McDavid. But
When you have Connor
he,
McDavid and Leon
but
Draisaitl.
but he's one of the most productive players on the ice some nights, and you're like, okay, oh my god, Puljujarvi is really playing a really good game. And then there's other opportunities where you watch him play, and a lot of the times you're like, where's Puljujarvi? Like, where the hell is he? And it's a little bit frustrating, I think, if you're an Oilers fan, to see a guy who's 6'4", 200 pounds, 201 pounds to struggle at that factor. And look, he's playing third line minutes next to Hamlin and Dylan Holloway, James Hamlin, Bill Holloway. Like these are not guys that he should be playing with. He should be on the top, two lines playing with Nugent Hopkins or even with Draisaitl. But he's had those opportunities with them at some point, and it hasn't worked out either. So I think this is a chance now where he has to go to a team that is not necessarily contending for a cup, but a team that's going to give him an opportunity to play. And I think
But a
a
lot
really
less pressure too.
that's it. I think a team that actually makes a lot of sense, and we're going to just jump straight into it. I'm going to start off with the Arizona Coyotes. And I think the reason this makes a lot of sense is because Arizona is one of those teams that, again, like they're in a rebuild. They're not expected to be that good, but they're a team that plays with a lot of heart. And if you watch Arizona play, there's an opportunity for him to play on the top six. There's an opportunity for him to play on the power play. There's an opportunity for him to play in a better role, you know? And look at a guy like Nick Ritchie as an example. Nick Ritchie left Toronto, went to Arizona, and now he's playing, some decent hockey. He's not playing fantastic hockey, but he's playing decent hockey. And I think with Arizona, it's an opportunity. They can take him on. He's $3 million, so he's not a lot of money. You can probably give up like a fifth or a sixth to get him, even less than that, maybe, to potentially get a guy like Puljujarvi. So it's not going to cost them much to do, and I think it could work for Arizona. He's a guy that I think if you play him on the top line or the top two lines, could definitely produce. And you put him on the power play as well. It's a guy
Yeah.
that could work. So I see Arizona as a potential destination. I don't know about you, Chris, but I see it
Yeah,
as
of course.
a destination.
He's 24 years old. He's still fairly young. The Arizona Coyotes at this point, they just want anyone to be playing on their
Yeah,
roster. It's been working out in terms of their arena change. The Mullet Arena has been generating a lot of buzz. But this is a guy that said that, he. It takes a lot to play with a guy like Connor McDavid. It's a lot of pressure, and so, he should be a guy that's playing top minutes. But maybe if he's not able to do that in the NHL, maybe he should do that in another league. So his confidence is really like at rock bottom right now. And despite his skill level, like he's very hesitant when it turns into like carrying it like the puck on his own, right? And he rather just like pass the puck to somebody else because he lacks the confidence to do it himself. And if he goes to Arizona, there's a lot less pressure playing in a big hockey market, especially in Canada, in Edmonton. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of superstars in that team, high expectations. So you really can't have a bad night. And going to Arizona, that's a perfect fit in terms of money, in terms of what they could give up in a trade, in terms of value, and in terms of fit. Another destination would be the Anaheim Ducks. Why? Well, it's a team that's basically at a rock bottom, and they're a team that is rebuilding. And if you put Puliarvi on a line with probably a guy like Mason McTavish or Troy Terry or Trevor Zegras, that could definitely be a fantastic fit. Guys that are making a name for themselves in the NHL, even though Zegras is already a highlight reel. But there's not any expectations there. They have a new general manager. There's a lot of things that are shifting, and a guy that the Edmonton Oilers have been linked to is John Klimberg of the Anaheim Ducks, who has a year left. On his contract, and so does Puliarvi. So the money could work. They're gonna have to eat some cap space, but then there's also gonna be some other pieces involved in a trade. But I definitely do believe that that could be a fit because of the interest on both sides. And if I'm mistaken, the general manager of the Anaheim Ducks has been scouting Puliarvi and would like to give him a trial run, um, for the rest of the season if they would trade for him now and see how it goes heading into the offseason.
yeah,
So maybe they could think of maybe extending him. I do see Puliarvi possibly being like what Sonny Milano was last year for the Ducks. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for them. Um, even though he had a pretty good season, now he's in Washington. But in Puliarvi, it's something that when you're a first round talent, especially in the top five, there's a lot that you
yeah.
could that you
And I
could get
think
from.
And I think there's a lot of pressure, and this is why, like, I see a lot of people talk about Puljujarvi, and he talked about the pressure and how it was hard to play with McDavid. I think that some guys just thrive under pressure, and I think some guys can't handle the pressure a lot. And I think that two teams that we mentioned right now, Arizona and Anaheim, these guys don't have pressure to be good, right? The Ducks are the worst team in the NHL right now, and Arizona's not far off either. So these are two teams that I think make a lot of sense because they're at a point where they're rebuilding. So they're in a position where they're like, listen, we can buy low and potentially sell high on this guy if he becomes really, really good. So it makes a lot of sense for teams like Anaheim, for teams like Arizona, for teams like even Columbus to some extent
Yeah.
to take a chance on this type of player because at the end of the day he still is 24 years old, right? He's still a guy. Look at Tage Thompson at 24 years old and what he's doing, right? I'm not saying Puljujarvi is going to turn into Tage Thompson, but what I'm saying is that he's still young enough that he's still got the development in him that he can potentially turn into something decent for another team. And I think it's just not working out in Edmonton. And he lacks the confidence. I think the Oilers are going to have to sell really, really low on him. But I think that it's going to be the bet in Puljujarvi's best interest and the Oilers' best interest to just part ways. And so I think Columbus makes a lot of sense as well because again, it goes back to the pressure thing, kind of what I was saying with Columbus not necessarily being a market that has a lot of pressure. Carolina, same thing. Carolina's more of a playoff team though, but Carolina makes a lot of sense because they're a team that doesn't have a lot of pressure. I saw links, to be honest, and I know that we're Habs fans, we see it all the time, but we saw links to potentially Joel Edmondson and Jesse Puljujarvi swapping places and the Habs getting Puljujarvi. But I don't think it makes sense for Montreal to make that move, just simply for the fact that if Puljujarvi can't handle the pressure in Edmonton and handle the pressure of playing McDavid, he's not going to be able to handle the pressure in Montreal. And
Yeah,
that's the truth. I don't want
yeah,
to be mean, but Montreal is Montreal and Toronto are the two biggest markets in the NHL when it comes to pressure. So you're really going to go and put a guy who hasn't done well under pressure on the team that has literally media scrutiny over who should be playing on the fourth line. Like, there's let's be honest here. So I'm not saying he wouldn't be a fit in Montreal. I think he would be a fit in Montreal under certain criterias. But if we're talking solely on pressure, I don't think Puljujarvi would fit in a market like Montreal, in
yeah,
my
and
opinion.
another thing as well, like even though he's linked to that team, and the Edmonton Oilers have been linked to Joel Edmondson, who because they're
Yeah,
looking for a defensive defenseman. They've been linked to Sean Monahan on multiple occasions.
yeah.
I don't think it's gonna work out. I don't think in terms of the youth movement, it makes sense, but in terms of the personal reasons and how the market is in Montreal, I don't think it's a fit necessarily.
No,
Uh,
exactly.
there's also Detroit. I think Detroit's another team that has that youth movement going on as well under Stevie Yzerman. A perfect example of a player that had high potential, started off strong, and the
You know what I you know what I would
his
see as a
numbers.
trade?
Yeah,
You
what?
know what would make a lot of sense as a trade?
Yeah,
I think what would be really interesting to see, and actually, I'm gonna just check just to make sure that he's playing at least, because I don't want to say something out of my ass without at least making sure that he's at least playing this season. Okay, so he's played 9 games for Detroit. Philip Zadina for Jesse Puljujarvi, I think would make a lot of sense for Detroit
that's
and Edmonton.
possible. That's
You know
possible.
why? It's two guys that I don't think have lived up to the expectations that their teams have expected from them. I know Zadina's dealt with injuries, and I
Joe
think as soon as
Valeno
he,
as well too, who could be another piece.
yeah, but I think like I'm not saying trade a super young guy to trade like I don't know. I'd probably keep Valeno, but like Zadina's a guy that I think we've talked about has about him not reaching his potential. Potentially, Detroit goes. You know what? Listen, one guy that needs to change of scenery versus another guy that needs to change of scenery. Let's do it, right? Zadina for Puljujarvi straight up. I know Puljujarvi's a little bit older, but it could work. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I'm not saying Detroit's gonna go and do that, but if you have to look at what a return would be for Puljujarvi, let's say, it would be
Yeah.
another guy that's underperforming for a guy that's underperforming. So
Well,
I think there's
yeah,
definitely possibilities. I think there's a lot of teams in the NHL that could use a Jesse Puljujarvi, and I think there's a lot of teams in the NHL that would take a chance on Jesse Puljujarvi. The question becomes, I'm not saying cap hit wise, but a lot of teams have 50 contracts. And so it's about, do you really want this guy on your roster? And if so, where you're going to play. It's kind of like Tolvanen, right? A lot of teams didn't pick up Tolvanen because they didn't see him on their roster. So it's a question of like if Tolvanen, who was available for free, didn't get picked up, how much is Puljujarvi really, really worth in that situation, right? So
yeah, and like I was saying before, Dominic Kubalik, okay,
yeah,
his numbers were diminished the last couple of seasons with Chicago. He wasn't the same player that he was when he first joined
for
the
sure.
team. Um, then he goes to Detroit, and now he's having a comeback season, right? So I could definitely see Puliarvi doing the same thing in Detroit. And yeah, like we said, all their trade destinations have a couple things in common. First, the youth movement. There's a lot of young guys on these teams that could, properly surround Puliarvi as they're a growing team. Second, there's not a lot of expectations because they're not really. It's either because the market is not really as crazy as it is in Edmonton, and also there's some teams that just they're going through a rebuild, right? So there's no expectations whatsoever. So, I'd like to hear in the comment section below what your thoughts are in terms of a Jesse Puljujarvi trade. Where does he go? Where does he fit? And honestly, he could fit anywhere. He could even go to
Yeah.
a contending team. But in terms of looking at Jesse Puljujarvi's situation as a whole, we have to look at a team that is very young, not too many expectations, like we were saying, and obviously has the cap space to make a trade. And obviously, if Edmonton is looking for a defensive defenseman or another, problem in exchange for Jesse Puljujarvi, then that could be a possibility as well. We're not expecting a lot for Puljujarvi in terms of trade value, but we'd definitely like to hear your mock trades in the comment section below. Luca, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just kind of like what you said before about any team can use him. I really think that I'd be very surprised if Jesse Puljujarvi didn't get traded at this point, just because I still think he's got you know some good hockey left in him. I don't think people should just give up on a guy like that, especially with the numbers that he put up the last 2 seasons. And there's an he's an NHL player. Like this guy's an NHL player. I think he just needs a change of scenery, and I hope that he gets it for his sake, and I
Yeah.
hope that when he does get it, he thrives under that situation and becomes a really a decent player in the NHL. He's not going to turn into the fourth overall potential that he once was, but if he can be a useful third line guy for a solid team and put up 30, 40 points in a season, that could be a guy that's useful. I think teams would be happy with that. So that's kind of how I see it, and we'll see what type of
Yeah.
deal
I-
comes up, but I don't think the Oilers get much for him, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree with the rumors surrounding him the last
Yeah,
couple of months, and now the article that's out. He'll be dealt by the 2023 trade deadline. Anyways,
yeah,
guys, don't
I
forget
think
to
so.
like this video if you haven't already, comment in the comment section below, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast.